People chat, just make sure you can hear me. We're like 20 seconds in.
Yep.
Yep. Am I audible too?
Right. I just want to make sure someone that's not us can hear us. Who's that paranoid? There's nothing. All right, perfect. Thank you. All right, we're going to get started. We have a ton of registrations, but I will start out by saying that these slides will be made available ASAP. This is being recorded, so you can listen to me and Sumit whenever you want to. I'm sure that you can turn us into some cool TikTok video. Those are our Twitter handles. I'm pretty sure that's also our GitHub handles. I have to check yours, Sumit. And then,
No, for my other is different.
oh,
Yep.
there he goes.
There
He
it
has
is.
both right there. I matched mine just to make it super easy. So because webinars, everyone's having webinar fatigue, I usually don't introduce like ourselves, but I figured this would be more interesting. So I'm based out of Chapel Hill, North Carolina, although I'm actually at the beach today because I misjudged when I booked this webinar like 2 months out where I was actually going to be. I put interests. So I've really gotten into electric bicycles during this pandemic because hauling all these kids is very difficult on a normal bike, and it keeps them entertained, and it's safe outdoor activity. I do a lot of running. I enjoy sci-fi and Star Wars, and I think the most odd one is I do a lot of gardening in my tiny yard. I like growing mint and stuff. Interesting fact, uh, we are still allowed, like Ansible acquisition is like a smaller office from Red Hat, so we still allow dogs in the office, or we've just been grandfathered in. And more people know my dog Lexi. That's actually a picture of her down there. Than they know my name. They're like, "That's Lexi's dad." They don't actually know who I am if they're not on my exact team. And then Sumit, you want to introduce yourself?
Yep. Yeah. Hey guys. So my name is Sumit, and I'm based out of New Delhi, India. So as Sean was telling about his interest, so basically I am like I like long drives, but during this pandemic time, I have not been able to go out much. So I have developed a kind of habit of watching web series, and that too in binge. So yep, and like in 2020, my daughter was born, so I love playing with her. And I don't have a interesting fact like Sean, like I don't have a dog, but yeah, from Ansible engineering prospects, I can say that I have my footprints pretty much everywhere. So yep, that's pretty much me.
I guess fun fact, we both have 1-year-old daughters, which is
Yeah.
because they don't really seem to care about the pandemic, but it's a lot of work. So
True
I'm in
that.
technical marketing, and Sumit's on the engineering team, and we kind of work in conjunction. So we like to have an engineer and someone on marketing together present. So I'll go through the agenda really quickly. I have a ton of content, and again, if you don't see the content or you miss something, we're going to make sure all these slides and everything are available. There's nothing secret here. There's nothing we're trying to keep that's proprietary here. It's an open company. It also means open culture, open docs, open slide decks. There's nothing that we're trying to hide or force through the webinar. It's just an excuse to create content for like a marketing activity. We're going to go through what is Ansible Network Automation like really quickly. I know some folks might be new to it that are on the call, and it's always hard with the webinar when we have hundreds of folks that are at different varying abilities. So it should not matter your ability. I try to make these so it doesn't matter if you're an expert or a beginner. You'll take something home today, hopefully. We'll cover really briefly what is a collection, and then we're going to cover this meta collection. And I avoided memes. I was going to have Morpheus from the Matrix in there somehow, but I decided not to because I knew, I knew it was going to get reviewed out. And we'll go through some sample use cases. I figured it's much easier. I used to approach network automation like very procedurally with like explaining concepts. I feel like it's better just to start with use cases and like how you attack those use cases for kind of like quick automation victories, and then like give some kind of call to action, like where do you go next? And then Sumit's going to do some demos for us, fairly simple, and we'll put those up on GitHub as well. We just kind of there's so many things you can demo that we're kind of brainstorming like what would be interesting. So we'll keep it very simple but pretty powerful. So really quickly, a lot of people are familiar with Ansible, but they might not be familiar with like the product. So just like there's Fedora, which is upstream project that many people are familiar with, the Fedora project. There's the downstream Red Hat Enterprise Linux. It's very similar with Ansible, is that there's the upstream open source project that many people are familiar with, and it's very used. It's like the Swiss Army knife of automation. Then there's the downstream paid product that we sell, which obviously includes support, but we kind of divided it up into three categories. There's the automation part. Includes like Tower, which is a web UI and API for your automation. It also includes now cloud services, like hosted services on cloud.redhat.com. So this includes like analytics, where you just toggle on a switch and you can see analytics of all your different Tower clusters. It includes services catalog, which is kind of like a very lightweight service now to create kind of orderable items for your team, for someone that's maybe not an automation expert. We kind of consider this persona like a consumer. And then it also includes certified content, which includes collections, which I'll dive into, like what is a collection and what does that mean when you say certified content, because content's a very ambiguous term, meaning it doesn't really define very well what it is. So let's dive into that in a second. And then obviously, what is Ansible Network Automation? And this is a wall of text, but I figured it'd be good. There's not anything I wanted to cut yet, but think of Ansible Network Automation as kind of these categories. And I got asked about this kind of atom drawing on the left, solar system drawing. There's no importance based on the inner and outer valences here. Like it was just for artistic purposes. So don't read too much in the drawing. It was just to be kind of more artful, because I don't want my slides to all be like a wall of text. But routers and switches are obviously like the 80% use case of a lot of network automation, but you're seeing a lot more things with like load balancers like F5, A10, network controllers is this category, like Cisco ACI, Cisco NSO. There's firewalls like Checkpoint and Cisco ASA. And this IP access management, I think it actually should read IP access or IP address management. So think of something like NIOS info blocks or something where you're doing IPAM, IP address management. So all this content, this automation tools that you would use are network automation. So think of it as Ansible Network Automation as Ansible Automation for network use cases or that network domain. And then trying to divide this up anymore, hopefully a logo on here kind of reigns home. It's just another way to draw that previous drawing, as there's A10, Arista, Aruba, Checkpoint, Cisco, Dell, Infoblox, F5, and then there's some open standards too, right? So there's Vios, which is a open source router based off the old Viata project. There's Open vSwitch, there's Juniper. The list goes on, but hopefully this helps folks understand that ecosystem of supported content that we have. So when we say content, I think that's a little bit confusing to people that might either kind of two categories. They're new to Ansible, or they have not messed with collections yet, which is completely possible because a lot of folks might be on just community stuff where it's all batteries included. So collections, just think of them as like the easiest way I kind of think of this is like, I don't upgrade my Facebook or my phone to upgrade my Facebook app. So I have an app store where I download apps. So think of content as how I talk to stuff, where it's modules, roles, whatever within the Ansible content. And I put a video here to help explain it. It's red.ht Ansible collection. It's Ansible_collection if it's hard to see on your screens. You can also just go to youtube.com/Ansible Automation and see our channel. And there's a little like 5-minute video that goes into what a collection is. So these are just standard packages. Think of them as content packs that include all the tools you need to talk to a device. So for example, there'd be like a Cisco iOS collection. There's a Arista.eos collection. There's a Juniper Networks.junos collection. And what's inside these collections? So this can include playbooks, it includes plugins, roles, docs, and then it's also kind of the entire folder structure. And then it ties it up in a tar.dz file. So this is what you would install, and you get that content. And it's really important that you want this content, because if there's a bug fix or a new feature or a new module, you no longer have to like install all of Ansible to get that new content. It's completely asynchronous. So that same example of your iPhone or your Android phone, I just update the app. I don't update the whole operating system to get the newest content. It becomes really easy for vendors certified content. So like if Checkpoint has a new module come out, we can just install that new collection really quickly. So my coworker Craig was like, but you said this webinar was about the meta collection. What the heck is a meta collection? It's a direct quote from him. I stole it from his from our group chat. So maybe start with what is the problem we're trying to solve? So we've created this really awesome way to get new content, but I might be a network engineer that's installing lots of different types of content. So we have Cisco, Arista, Juniper networks. I might have utility libraries that want to install the Ansible utils, which I'm gonna dive into some more information there. But this becomes a little bit cumbersome, a little bit difficult to keep track of all the different types of collections I might want. So what we've done for our customers to make this really easy is we kind of just put a bow tie on this, and you have one collection that includes other collections. It is that easy. A meta collection is just a collection that includes all the collections that work together into one bundle. So it's all that fully supported content wrapped up into a single bundle. It makes it really easy. So you can just Ansible Galaxy collection install this collection, and then you don't need to take care of installing every sub collection that you need to do. And then you also know that like one of the big things we solve with collections is what is supported content versus what's just community content. And we kind of want to have our cake and eat it too. We don't want to stop contributors, creators from creating automation content, but we also have customers that find it difficult sometimes to navigate what content's fully supported. So this is a way that they can, like in one command, grab this from Automation Hub, and then they can grab all of the supported content, and it filters out all the community content unless they want some community content, so that they know when they open a support case or there's an SLA and everything on these exact modules, plugins, roles, etc. So there's a really easy way to differentiate between supported content and just community content. So it's kind of both. So what is inside that content? So we have kind of the big three vendors that we see a lot are fully supported. These modules are made by our engineers, like Smith and his team and everyone on there. So we have Arista and the EOS collection. So you'll see that first name is the namespace. So Arista has a namespace and they have multiple collections, and the EOS collection is part of the Ansible Network Meta collection. Cisco has three big operating systems that we have included in the Meta collection: Cisco.ios, iOS XR, which is like their service provider router, and then NXOS, which is kind of their data center router. So they kind of have enterprise, data center, and service provider, and lots of folks using those in plenty of use cases outside of those three. There's Juniper Networks. So Juniper makes it a little bit simple in that their operating system has a common command line and API and netconf interface across all the different devices. So it doesn't matter if it's service provider, data center, or like their firewall. It all uses a standard Junos platform. So we just treat it all the same from an automation perspective because we're just control plane. So it's just Junos. So those are our traditional networking platforms. We'll skip the middle right now. I'll go to the far right. So there's three kind of open standards that we've included in the Meta collection. FRR stands for free range routing. That was actually developed at a company I used to work for, Cumulus Networks, a long time ago. But now it's like a consortium of multiple companies that have contributed to it. So it's basically a routing package you can install on top of Linux operating systems. And there's a variety of different vendors out there that kind of use that under the hood. So FRR is free range routing. It looks kind of similar to an iOS type command line, but it's slightly different. There's OVS, Open vSwitch, which again is kind of embedded in a lot of places and used a lot of times on Linux infrastructure. So it's kind of an alternate competitor almost to FRR, as they kind of overlap a bit, but I see OVS more on the host side and FRR more on like network embedded switches, like white box switches. And then BIOS is kind of very similar to FRR, but BIOS we see a lot of times as virtual routers. It's an open source router that you can grab. So those are kind of these open networking platforms. And then we'll go right back to the middle here. And there's two major collections included within the Meta collection. There's the Ansible.NET common, and this kind of concentrates on how network devices how Ansible talks to network devices. So it includes connection plugins. It includes kind of dealing with the command line and the prompts. So like, for example, the Arista and Cisco collections and Juniper collections would use netcommon to be able to communicate to network devices. So it's kind of under the hood. You wouldn't really use much in this directly. However, the Ansible Utils collection, this is a fairly new collection that's really, really cool. And we're going to elaborate on this, but this is kind of like a toolbox. That's why I chose that kind of little icon for it, of different utilities that network operators can use. It's really, really cool. And it even includes like a parsing tool. So we can parse operational state, which I'll kind of elaborate on. I don't want to waste too much more time here. So when we look at modules within a collection, and this is going to be a brief overview, and I'll put more material online because I think this is kind of like a crash course to like all the different network automation stuff. But basically, modules are kind of broken up into these kind of 4 categories that we see today. There's command modules. So if I just want to run a command like show IP int brief on a Cisco router, I can just run that arbitrary command. There's fact modules. So this retrieves information from a device and structured data. We'll kind of elaborate that on this use case coming up. There's config modules. So config is kind of a catch-all ability to edit anything on a network device's running configuration. And a lot of folks use like templating to be able to template this out. And then resource modules are fairly a newer paradigm. They've been around over a year now, but these are really, really interesting because they lower the barrier to doing automation. So you don't need to learn templating. You don't need to learn a config module. These are just, these give you a prescriptive data model for you to configure stuff on that device. And what's really cool is they work on brownfield networks really well, is if you have an existing configuration, it can read that configuration in, and then you can just edit that data model. So resource modules are a way to create quick automation victories for a team where they don't have to create these kind of over complicated Jinja templates, or they might be overwhelmed by how complicated their templates are getting. So kind of examples of here, like Cisco iOS command, right? Fax would be Arista EOS fax. Config could be Juniper Networks, Junos config. I kind of chose a different vendor for each one. Again, it's namespace, dot collection name, dot, and then the role or the module name. So it's fairly easy. So this is called what we say is a fully qualified collection name, or FQCN. And you're going to start seeing a lot more of this because it allows you to download that newest collection, use the newest one, and you can see exactly what you're using. And then the resource module down below is like, hey, we have a module just for ACLs. So it becomes really easy just to edit ACLs back and forth. So again, the reason network resource modules are important, and you'll see me and others push for them really like prescriptively, is that they become very easy. They have a data model assigned to them, and they have bidirectional with facts. So every time we add a new resource module, you can collect those as facts. So it becomes really easy to have a data model representing your network device, which helps with kind of this idea of configuration to code, infrastructure as code, network as code, any of the different terms you've heard, or network NetOps or net DevOps, is these resource modules make this much easier, especially in brownfield environments. So you can read in a configuration, you have it in YAML and JSON, and then you can edit that, and then you stop worrying about the actual automation. You stop worrying about the running config, and you just start worrying about that source of truth. So I'm not going to go through every use case today, but I kind of sampled 3 that I thought would be interesting. All of these are made possible by the network collection. So if you did a Ansible Galaxy collection, install the network meta collection, you could do all of these different use cases. So the first one's kind of like fact gathering, right, and what we can do with that. The second one is starting to use resource modules and understanding how they work. And the third one is kind of like a lot of network engineers, it's a little bit more advanced use case, but I think as I kind of outline it, it'll make a lot of sense, the difference between the second use case and this third one here. So infrastructure awareness, why is it important? I tell a lot of network teams to start here because it allows them to understand Ansible, work together in an Ansible environment. They can get some automation victories, but it's really nice because it's read-only, meaning I'm not even editing configurations on a network device. I'm just reading those network configurations, setting up my automation, so there's less risk. There's no fear of editing the configurations and taking the network down, as we're just starting to get our hands dirty understanding Ansible automation. So what are facts. So when I do something like on a Cisco device and I do show version, there's a lot of really good stuff here, but it's just a text blob. It's a huge text blob. It's meant for a human to read, not really helpful for a computer where I have to like regex out these values. And what's really nice with facts on Ansible is we're building all these things into the platform itself. So here, if I just run Ansible iOS facts, I can get that same exact information. And I removed a lot of output for brevity to make this fit on a Google slide. So here you can see that I have a key like Ansible net iOS type, and then the value is iOS XE. So it becomes really easy to get structured data out of it. Now what's really nice is as we add resource modules, we enhance these facts each time. So that network native configuration is converted to structured data. You can see down here on the right, Ansible network resources is now I can gather more and more resources. And this kind of asynchronously updates from the Ansible platform itself. So as we add more resource modules, we get more and more facts that are key valued structured data around that network device. BGP, OSPF, interfaces, ACLs, like anything you can think of, we keep adding more and more resource modules. And then these resource modules, the data model we collect them in is now the exact same as we can push back to the device. But if we're just doing read-only playbooks, what we can do is we can create kind of like customized reports using those facts because everything's stored in JSON, stored in YAML. It's just structured data. So originally I had this as malleable, but we thought maybe a better word might be flexible because we don't know how common that word is malleable, kind of like manipulate the data, because we can create kind of like cool reports using any tool that kind of can read in JSON. So one of the examples I like to show, I'm still messing with this website, is I can just template out websites and generate dynamic documentation. So a lot of times when I worked in support for networking devices, like their source of truth might have been like napkin notes or a PDF file that hadn't been updated in several months. So a lot of times I spent all my time just kind of remapping their network before I could even begin troubleshooting it. So I would like run show IP OSPF neighbor, show IP int brief. I would look at their configuration and then I would create my own drawing locally, and then I could begin troubleshooting their issue. Where with dynamic documentation, I can run all those commands that I would have run to kind of remap their network and kind of do an audit of exactly what's happening. One of the things I like to talk about where dynamic documentation is really helpful is like I would get support cases where someone would say like, hey, when host 23 talks to host 48, it's slow sometimes. And that's like the worst support ticket you could get as a support engineer for a network because you don't know where the problem is. They just know it's slow sometimes. So one, it's not reproducible very easily. It happens sometimes. It's only certain hosts. That's a little bit helpful. So you can at least kind of map that out. And in a data center, you have a lot of ECMP, so you have multiple paths. So it's very confusing. What I discovered in this particular network, which dynamic documentation can help out, is the MTUs were a mismatch on one interface out of hundreds. So you could really easily see like the MTU pop up and go, oh, they never upped MTU from 1500 to 9000. Then I also noticed that they had a misconfiguration of OSPF. So they had like point to point and then broadcast on the other side. So there's a little bit mismatched. So the reason it was slow sometimes is that when it hashed ECMP routes between those two hosts, one path was fine, the other path was like unidirectional or something odd. So once we fixed that, it was fine. But that's something dynamic documentation is really good at, versus monitoring is not that great because that switch never lost connectivity. Those hosts never lost connectivity to each other. It was only sometimes throughput was affected. And that's where something like auditing your network and creating little reports, that's perfect use case for Ansible. Looks like I'm still good on time, so I'm going to keep on flying. I can't see the chat right now, so Elle and Sumit are looking. So scoped config management. So the word scoped, I played with this word a lot, and I like the word scoped. There might be a better word out there, but what I'm trying to say is automation is not all or nothing. Like you don't have to automate the entire configuration of 5,000 line NXOS device to start getting a victory for your team. So I think a lot of network engineers that have are way ahead on network automation, sometimes they miss the forest for the trees. I remember going into a customer and he understood all the technical concepts, but he was trying to understand why he couldn't get his team to automate. And not everyone is a programmer that's going to understand these massive templates and how you're creating your own little data model. So scoped config management, this is where we attack some use cases. We can use very simple resource modules where we've abstracted some of the complications into the module itself. It becomes really easy for a network team to just concentrate on a few automation victories. Like, how about we just automate VLANs? We scope down what we're concentrating on, just to VLANs or ACLs or just a few different resources, and we expand versus automating the entire configuration all at once. Because it becomes overwhelming for network teams. I think at Red Hat Summit, I had 11, I call it like speed dating with customers, like these executive briefing or customer briefing. And I got one technical question out of 11 30-minute conversations and 10 conversations around the culture of automation. How do we get teams to automate? How do we get people to accept automation? And the reason is a lot of times is the scope is too large. Like they want to automate everything or nothing. And these resource modules can help with this. They were specifically built with customers in mind to help kind of scope in, get some automation wins, and expand. And this kind of maps to how I've seen our consultants have a lot of success as well. So there's a little diagram. I call these like marketecture diagrams because this isn't necessarily going to be exact situation, but it allows you to kind of visually see it. So we're going to have some sort of source of truth. This could literally be a Git repo. Make it really simple where it's just you're storing important data in a Git repo, but it could also be like netbox, device 42, info blocks. Like it could be something. Ansible, what's really powerful about it is we work with everything. And then we deploy that to our network devices. It's that really easy, is that you configure your source of truth, not your network devices. So if we have a source of truth, like VLANs, I might have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 VLANs here, 20, 30, 40, 50. That's it. That's all I have to configure, because I configure the data model. So on the far left, we see a data model. This is the built-in one into Ansible. You can put a different key on it. You can manipulate it a bit, but the data model is fairly simplistic. And then we just transform this data model into the network native configuration. So this data model is the same across Juniper, Arista, Cisco. Anything that we support with the resource module is going to use the same data model. So it becomes really easy to operationalize around the data model, like a VLAN's a VLAN, versus understanding the exact commands for like a Juniper box that network engineer might have to look up. So to apply these VLANs, we just use the module, arista.eos.vlans, and it's that easy. Is you just send the config, in this case, the key VLANs. And then we have, I'm not going to go over them all today. We have kind of 3 states: merged, replaced, overridden, and then obviously deleted, but I think deleted is pretty easy to understand. But merged, replaced, overridden, I'm just going to cover merged today, which adds it. And then replaced, overridden is kind of as you get more mature in your network automation, you would move to replaced and then overridden, which kind of enforces that configuration versus just make sure it's there. But just to show merged on this next example, if my existing configuration, and this is an example of like a Arista box, which is really similar to a Cisco classic iOS box, is show run section VLAN. So I have 3 VLANs on the device, 5, 10, 50. And then my source of truth, I have 5, 10, 20. So if I add this task on the far right, what we're going to see is there's a missing VLAN here, VLAN 20, and it's going to add that VLAN and merge it in. So that's what state merge does here, is it makes sure to enforce that any VLANs in my data model are now enforced onto that new configuration. And that's how easy it is you start worrying about your source of truth, not the running configuration of the devices, not the playbooks themselves, not the existing configurations, is your network engineers start moving towards this idea of a source of truth. And this is not a Ansible concept. We make this really easy. This is kind of an automation concept. And this kind of gets you towards this idea of infrastructure as code. As if you see that term, is your infrastructure is no longer the source of truth, like the running configuration. This Git repo or this, whatever your source of truth is, a database somewhere, becomes your source of truth. So we can also operationalize this So Tower is a web UI, it is an API. It has this idea of push button automation. So someone who doesn't know how to run command line automation, you can provide them with a user interface so that they can just press a button. And then here it becomes really easy as this is an idea of a survey. It's a really simple concept like a Google form or a survey monkey. And they can kind of pick their state. You can make drop-down lists, multiple select, single select drop-down lists, and then kind of text areas. So it becomes really configurable to operationalize this. So imagine if you wanted to give like a server team access to like 10 different VLANs they could create, you could kind of give them guardrails or safety rails to be able to communicate, like they can do some configuration on your network automatically without bothering you, but it's scoped in, right? Kind of back to that idea of a scoped configuration. And it becomes really easy to operationalize that with a survey. And just because of time and a webinar, we'll kind of end this particular section on the scoped config management is like, what would I attack? And we have resource modules for lots of different things like interfaces, for example, but I don't, in routing protocols, but for me, I wouldn't start there per se because like how often is the IP addresses on your interfaces changing? So where I see a lot of changes happen, and when changes on a network happen, there's always human error, is things like ACLs, prefix lists, route maps, and VLANs. I think these are 4 great use cases. You don't have to attack all 4 at once, but if I was beginning an automation journey with a team, especially a team that doesn't have a lot of background or their background's dated with Perl and Bash and TCL. I'm trying to think back to my Cisco days. These are the 4 that I would attack, and I would attack one at a time. So if it's a big campus network, think of how much automation victories you could have just getting your team of 7 network engineers on board to understanding VLANs in a source of truth. This allows some quick automation victories, and then you can land and expand your automation initiative. All right, we're going to move into another use case, operational state validation. What we're going to do is kind of differentiate between your running configuration and your operational state. I think I have a good example on the next slide. So there's a bunch of stuff on the slide, but I'm gonna go over basically all these. I just like to summarize these for people who get the slides after the fact. So kind of back to that example I talked about in a support case is the running configuration doesn't necessarily map to the operational, like what's happening. Like just because I configure something doesn't mean it's happening. And I think a lot of network engineers, this might be even easier to understand than system administrators, because just because I configure my network switch doesn't mean that connection to another device is actually online. That's something that network engineers understand really well. So that's different than resource modules, because resource modules only care about configuration state, what's configured, what's on that device, where we might want to check about operational state. So in this case, this kind of little drawing is just showing like, hey, I have 2 connections that are failing. So think about if I had SNMP monitoring on this device, it may or may not, depending on how that monitoring is configured, even pick up that the interface is down. And the interface might not be down. It might just be misconfigured where it's up, but OSPF is like flapping. And that's when it gets kind of hairy, is trying to understand the operational state may be difficult. So if I do show run interface Ethernet 1.1, that is the interface configuration. In this case, it's showing some OSPF configuration. If I do show IP OSPF neighbor on a Cisco device or an Arista device, slightly different on a Juniper device, that's my operational state, because it's configured correctly, but it doesn't mean the other side's configured correctly. So when we say operational state, we mean kind of like what is actually happening in the network. There was maybe 2 or 3 years ago, there was this big marketing push in network that you might still hear. I'm not hearing it a lot recently because I think it kind of was a fad, but this idea of intended state or declarative intent, I might have heard those terms. It's the same idea as trying to understand operational state. It's just kind of like show commands versus running commands, if you want to really dumb it down to make it easy to understand. So circling back, I said we would, the Ansible Utilities Collection. This is the tool chest for playbook authors. It has a bunch of really cool stuff. It's included in the Ansible Network Meta Collection. So when you install uh, Ansible.network, you'll get this, but you can also install this by itself, Ansible.utils. And this is a picture from Automation Hub, which is the downstream productized version of Ansible Galaxy. So there's kind of four categories inside Ansible utilities. There's filter plugins. An example of this is like I can take XML data and convert this to a Python dictionary. So it allows us to manipulate data, and it's kind of originally made by the network team, but we try to make sure this Ansible utilities can be used by lots of different use cases besides just network engineers. We have lookup plugins. So one of my favorites I really like is sometimes network boxes, they have network engineers complain. They're like, give me JSON. I want JSON output. So then some developer somewhere is like, I don't know, here, have JSON. And that JSON blob is unreadable. It's structured, but it's huge. It's like this parentheses within parentheses within parentheses within parentheses, and then like a giant dictionary lookup of a list of 0. And it's like, this is not very helpful, man. This is JSON, but I think you intentionally made this difficult. So one of the cool lookup plugins we have is 2paths. So this will flatten objects so you can see every value, what the key is for every value within that structure. This is one of my favorites, but there's a bunch of different lookup plugins within this library. I'm just sampling some in here. There's modules. The one we're going to talk about today is CLI parse. This allows us to parse operational state, and that's the reason we're showing the Ansible utils. And then test plugins. So these are really, really cool for network engineers. For example, there's one, I thought this was just super nerdy, is if you want to test an IP address to see if it's RFC 1918, like a private IP address, it'll give you a true false on that address. And there's a bunch of different test plugins like this. So now imagine you go back to that survey, you can add more guardrails. So if someone types in an IP address that's not private, you could fail a playbook on purpose and alert that team like, hey, like you tried to configure this on our network device. I thought Google Slides would get rid of those. But we're going to fail on purpose and give you a programmatic error. So this allows playbook authors to create like really cool, easy tests to create kind of safety rails for your automation, whether you want it to be this or that or not. This slide is a wall of text. I'm not going to go through this, but I thought this would be important because every time I present parsers, I get this question where, why don't you use X? Why don't you use this parser? Because there's 100 parsers out there that already exist. So our CLI parse module works with a variety of different parsers and parser libraries. So if you already have parsing built out, we can just absorb that. So there's the native parsing language within Ansible. There's XML, there's text FSM, there's NTC templates, there's TTP, there's PyATS. So that's one that works really well with Cisco because they have a whole team building out different parsers. There's JC, and then there's just JSON. So there's a ton of different parsers that exist. So the only takeaway for this slide is like, yeah, we work with that parser most likely that you're familiar with. What should I parse? So I thought we'd go back to that same idea of those modules, like what are cool things to parse that I should be parsing? And what I thought was like interface state is very good because just because you configured it doesn't mean that that connection's up. That could be a bad cable, for example. LLDP neighbors, that's a really easy win. OSPF neighbors, this is getting more interesting, right? Is actually have OSPF configured. A lot of ECMP data centers are OSPF. And then BGP, a lot of data centers are BGP. There's a whole network fad of eBGP data centers. So just trying to figure out east-west connections, are they online and running, let alone like actual BGP neighbors to the internet. So I thought these would be 4 good use cases. It doesn't mean that you can't parse any show command out there. It just means that these are maybe 4 things that you could attack. And we're still on time, perfect. So I'm gonna just do some like calls to action of where you can get more information and deeper dives, and then Sumit's gonna show a couple short demos, and then I'm gonna watch the questions. So first we have a technical ebook, so automate your network with Red Hat. So this goes through, I think, 3 to 4 different examples. So if you're new to Ansible Network Automation, this ebook's it's a free asset that we made. It's very short. I think it's like less than 20 pages ebook. So a PDF that you can download. So this is brand new as of, I think, March that I worked with the team on. So that's red.ht, automate your network. There's a networking workshop. I'm in the process of updating it, but there's a lot of good material out there on github.com/ansible/workshops. There's a bunch of different workshop content out there. So if you're not a network engineer, there's one for Linux, there's one for F5, there's one for security. So there's a bunch of different free material on there. There's a deep dive talk from Trishna, who's the engineering manager for network automation. So that's a really good talk as well. And then we have a course actually from our consulting team, DO457. It's a Red Hat certification for Ansible network automation. There's a bunch of different materials, both free and not, that to look at that are interesting. And with that, I'm going to try to figure out how to stop sharing. Oh, and of course it's just easy. And I'm gonna put myself on mute while Sumit shows a couple different quick demos. And these aren't crazy difficult. We're just trying to showcase what's available and
Yep.
show off utils.
Hey, thanks, Sean, for taking us through the ride of Ansible Network, what we do at Ansible Network, and Ansible Meta Collection, and all the lovely things that we do at Ansible Network. So, okay, I hope my screen is in sharing mode. So I hope you guys are able to see the command line. Sean, can you please confirm?
Yeah, I can see it. Sorry, I've muted myself.
Okay, so first thing, I'll be talking about Ansible Utils demo. So as Sean told you about, Ansible Utils is a lovely collection with all the filter plugins and modules, which actually helps the Ansible playbook writer to manipulate and maintain their data and gets visualization from their data. So what today I'll show is a small example of filter plugin, which is usable range. This particular filter plugin talks about let's suppose if you have a scenario where you have an IP address in CIDR format, like your IP address slash your 2428 and in CIDR format, and you want to get basically get the list out of the usable IPs out of that. So you can basically use this particular filter plugin and make your work much easier. So basically, it's a use case with respect to IPAM, as Sean was talking about. So let's see the playbook first. So I hope the font itself is big enough for you guys to follow. So as you can see, I am having 3 tasks, but out of those, the first task itself is calling the Ansible Utils usable range filter plugins. So what I'm trying to do is I am actually trying to get the number of usable IPs out of this particular IP address in CIDR format. And then on the second task, I'll be displaying all those usable IPs. It will be displayed in list format. So basically, if you want to go over through list of that particular IP using Ansible, you can do that. And the third thing that I'm trying to do is I'm trying to ping all those addresses, and I'm trying to check which all those IPs are up or not. So this is pretty nifty use case, and it is actually helpful because at times when you want to get the number of usable IPs out of the particular list of IPs, you can definitely go ahead and use this particular scenario. So just I'll try to run this. Hopefully, I should be able to do that if the demo bots are with me. Okay. So, yep. So currently, yeah. So as you can see in the result, it tried to expand the IP address in the CIDR format, and it listed out all the usable IPs in this particular CIDR format IP address. So these are the usable IPs in form of list. So third task that I was trying to do was pinging all those addresses and checking all those addresses are up or not. So this is the particular demo with respect to usable range. And as Sean talked about, that there are plenty of modules and filter plugins and action plugins that are available currently with Ansible Utils collections. So you can try all those scenarios. And if you want to automate your scenarios with respect to Ansible Utils, you can definitely do that. And let's say if you have any particular suggestion that you want to get, you want to automate certain use cases, you can definitely put an issue or open an issue in Ansible Utils collection, and definitely we can take that forward. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about was CLI parse. CLI parse actually takes in the data in the form of text, and it actually renders that data and gives you an output in parsed format. So let's see that particular demo. Okay, I am specifically logged out. Let me log into that particular device. Okay, I'm logged in. So let's see the playbook first. So as you can see, it's a pretty small and compact playbook. I am actually taking this host as router 2. In this case, router 2 is my Arista EOS router. So I'm taking route. I'm running this particular show interface command on Arista EOS device, and basically what I'm trying to do is get that show interface command, get that show interface output, and pass that so that I can get in a readable format and in a structured way. So we can just run that, and suppose that I should show you the template from where I'm generating that particular result. Okay, so let's do one thing. I'll make you see the debug output as well, because then only you'll be able to see the difference between the show interface command that you actually get from the device and after passing how it looked like. So let's run with the debug output. So you can see all these are the debug output. So yep, so you can see this was the output that I got from the device, basically from my Arista EOS router. So as you can see, standard out is the show interface output, and as you can see, it's in this format, and it's, you can say that it's not in very much readable format, and you cannot get much information out of this if you want, if you have. So at this point, I have just one Ethernet and one loopback, and but in enterprise scenario, you can have multiple Ethernets and everything at interface level. So this output can be quite complex. And if you use that particular CLI parse and you get to the output, so you can directly check out that how easy it is to get through the status of each of the interface. So for Ethernet 1, you can see hardware is Ethernet and its MAC address is this particular address. And what's its operational state? Basically, it's up or down. So all this you can get through CLI parse. And so for this CLI parse to work, you'll actually have to design a template for that. And for my case, I have written a template in the format of, so basically your template is a reject, you write in a regex format, and you try to pass the output that you get from your Cisco, basically Arista EOS router. And let me just show that. Okay, so this is the template, and this is how you will design your template. So, so at this point, you are just taking an example. Okay, so I have to search for this particular use case, for this particular statement where Ethernet is up. So for this, I am doing a regex search, and for this particular regex is this, and then you are displaying the result in your state operational protocol the same way you are trying to get the hardware address and MAC address. So yeah, so using CLI parts basically makes your life easier when it comes to reading the particular output in a structured manner. So yeah, as I said, and as Sean has already told you about, there are a ton of things that are available with Ansible Network, and there are a number of things with Ansible Utils and CLI parts. It all helps to make your life easy when it comes to network automation. So yep, so this was the two demos that I wanted to share with you guys. I think Sean has already shared the call to action. So probably we can directly go to the questions if we have
Yeah,
any.
sounds great. I think we've answered most of these in here. I'll read off a couple while we wait for
Okay.
more.
So
So will these templates be shared? So for like um a lot of different, it depends on which template library, but like our built-in ones, what I'm going to do is just put a bunch on Galaxy for community and users. They're just easy templates. With like network to code, like NTC, they have theirs online in their GitHub. For PyATS, you just install PyATS and Genie, and they have a lot included. So what we'll probably do, the docs are really good on parsers, but they don't point to the libraries. That's something we might change in our docs just to make it easier to find all the templates. What you'll find really quickly is for the most common use cases, someone's probably already parsed it. Like show interface, show IP-USPF neighbor, show BGP neighbor. So there's a bunch of different ones in there. We'll just try to do a better job of kind of putting those out there. But a quick Google, you'll find it. I just got to create kind of like a master page or something for the templates. Um,
why would you use a specific parser versus redo? Yeah, you have already answered that.
where do you see that one? Say that one again.
No, I think you already answered that. So
Yeah, yeah, and then PyATS and NTC one. So if you're already using them, it just allows you to get them into Ansible a bit easier. So if you're using Ansible Automation and you want to use their templates, we just integrate with those tools natively. So it becomes really easy to get their JSON payloads and just start integrating them with whatever else. So for example, if I um, wanted to take IP address information from my Cisco network and update info blocks, that's now stupid easy to do because I can just grab it using my PyATS or NTC templates, put them into basically structured data within Ansible, and then push that structured data up into info blocks or netbox or device 42, whatever your source of truth is, or Git. So we don't want folks that have already invested time, resources, energy into a parser to have to like reinvent the wheel yet again. That's not the goal. It's just to create kind of a tool chest for folks.
So there is one, if I want to install an Ansible playbook on a satellite server that does YAM updates to its target server, would I just add the target host name to the host parameters in the YAML script? So I'm not able to get, you are trying to install Ansible playbook on a satellite server. What do you mean by that? Can you
Like
just,
a, it probably means smart management, like Red Hat Satellite.
okay, okay.
Yeah, if I went to install Ansible Playbook on yeah, you would just change who you're targeting the playbook with. That would work. Any parsers for F5 networks automation? There's probably parsers. I just don't know where they are. I'm sure that they've written parsers. Should have grabbed an F5. We have a pretty good relationship with F5, and
Yep.
I'll see if maybe we capture the questions. I can see if I can point after the fact. I just don't know where they are off the top of my head. I can put that ebook back in here. I made a short URL to make this a little bit easier. There's a short URL. It'll take you to the ebook. Oh, Cindy already got to it too. It's the same link, by the way. I don't know my short URL is that much shorter than the real URL. Maybe that wasn't worth it. Can you input external variable file in a dictionary format into stateful
Yes, we
arrays?
can.
Yeah, and we can grab that data from a database on demand, like a lookup.
Yep.
So if you had it in honestly anything Ansible can talk to. We can just read it. Like what I usually see is like 30 to 40% of network teams are using just like Git. They just use Git natively. Another 30-40% are using some sort of proprietary system, like they use ServiceNow, like as their source of truth, or they use Netbox, or they use Infoblox, and then like the remaining 20% of folks, they have some sort of proprietary database or something that they use within an organization. And the answer is like we try to work with all of those because it's not like 80% of people are using one thing. It's a pretty big split between kind of people using traditional Git, people using traditional IPAM or something, right? And people using like their own, bring your own little odd whatever, and the intricacies with that. So we have to make sure we work with kind of any system. F5 has a mix of declarative and imperative modules, so I think it depends.
Also, for if you have any particular questions, you can also reach out to us on Ansible Network Slack channel, or there is a Libera chat on hashtag Ansible Network, and you can ping us your doubts and queries over there so that we can, because we usually hang out there. So if you have any queries around any of the modules or any particular template or plugin issues, then you can definitely reach out to us there, and probably we'll be able to solve your issues. Can Ansible devices use Ladder? So, yep, you already answered that. Okay. So we use the Yang model basically for our for all the network modeling. We And yes, as Sean has mentioned, for Juniper modules, we use only NetFarm. Then you have multiple host names to find out the host.
I can get the link real quick. Then we'll end the bridge because it's almost the top of the hour.
Okay, there is network working group.
All right, and we are out of time. I just posted the Slack link for folks. We'll be in chat. So if there's questions, you can just ask in the Slack chat. It's public.
Yep.
There's different time zones. There's people in there. I appreciate it. We'll get this up within 24 hours, the recordings. I'll try to get to some of these questions I didn't quite know the exact answers. And I appreciate everyone for joining on their busy Tuesday, and have a great rest of your day or evening.
Yep.
Bye.
Have a great day.